The
Thank you, sir.
target is up.
Thank you. No, thanks for, yes, appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me. I was a little confused on the venue, so I don't have any pretty slides like the tanker. So that's a first, right? The aviator doesn't outshine the tanker. But I'm gonna break it down, you know, very succinctly. And I think that just talking beforehand in the green room with some of your leadership, that there's probably quite a few questions out there, because we are, as a branch and a warfighting function, represented in every state and territory. And so I want to clear up any misconceptions you may have, no matter how long it takes. So first and foremost, about 16 months ago, I had 4 people on my team. And I called then Brigadier General Ray Davis. I said, I need some help. And they sent me 2 guys, Colonel Andrew Batten and Lieutenant Colonel Matt Kukula. And they were my 5th and 6th member of my team. And we've had a really good year just knocking down targets when it comes to requirements and contracting and S&T and getting our programs on board. But I couldn't have done it without them. I tell you, the other thing that we've committed to in aviation, and it's no secret, you know, coming out of ARI, is that we have to do a better job of being transparent, and we have to do a better job of communicating. To that end, we've had aviation summits. I think we're up to 5, which are General Officer Steering Council summits. General Hokinson's been in 1, but we're committed to having Compo 2 and 3 represented at each and every one of those. And Major General Gowan and Brigadier General Todd Hunt have also participated. So at all times, you are representative at every echelon to make sure that, again, when we talk FEL, that you have the story straight and you have folks in the team. And this is a total Army, you know, plan that we're building. So like Ross Kaufman, you know, we look at ARI 2012 and we say, okay, we designated the Apache and the Shadow teamed up to be our scout. And then the Donbass happened in 2014, and the Russians made a motorized rifle regiment slag metal in a matter of very few minutes. And we realized, holy cow, we got a problem, because we gave up our find and fix force to just go with the finish force. You know, because as a community, we are fire and maneuver in aviation. It's inherent in what we do, and we need to be able to find, fix, and finish our pacing threats. And so this is why we've stood up. I think this is why we're arguably, and it creates a lot of consternation, the number 3 priority, but it is the threat. And we need to generate standoff and overmatch within our aviation forces to bring back lethality. So we want to do 4 things in FEL. We want to be way more lethal. We want to be way more survivable. We want to have the reach of the future battlefield, and by reach, I mean speed, range, and endurance at range. And then we want to be sustainable. We have 4 lines of effort. I'm going to really just hit the big 2, the aircraft. First is the Future Attack Reconnaissance aircraft. This aircraft, again, is going to be a knife fighter. It's going to be a smaller form factor. Again, think our scout aircraft or our air cav squadrons. We need something that hides in the radar clutter. What we learned from the Mosul fight and a lot of the Syrian evolutions is that the urban rubble, you need a small aircraft to get in there and help the infantry or the tankers root out the enemy. So again, find them and fix them so someone can finish them. We've had a great year on FARA. We're the 2nd largest OTA the Army has ever done, and that's an other transactional authority contract of $1.9 billion. We awarded 5 OTA contracts this last April. We will down select to 2 vendors in March, and they will be flying in 2023. Competitive prototypes that are operationally relevant. And so we're putting a lot of our mission equipment on these aircraft as much as we can do early to make sure we can understand what are requirements and what are we gold plating, and make sure we get the gold plating out of there. When it comes to the Black Hawk replacement, future long-range assault aircraft is, so FLRAA. I didn't name these. You know, we had the youngsters have a little contest. They came up with some great names, and then people who outranked me named these things. So should have went with the kids. But it's stuck. You know, FLRAA, it's made its way around, and we are remembering them now on the Hill in the Department of Defense and hopefully in the greater Army community. This really truly is the year of FLRAA. We got 2 tech demonstrators flying. You may have seen the Boeing Sikorsky Lockheed Defiant, which is a lift offset compound with a pusher prop. They started flying this past February, and then the Bell V-280 has obviously been flying for a little over a year. So we got 2 things flying in about 4.5 years, which is tremendously fast in aviation speak. Within FLRAA, it used to be a multi-service program, and it still is, but it was withheld at the OSD level, and we really didn't want to move kind of at a slower pace that sometimes OSD puts you in. We wanted a Black Hawk-like program, which in my opinion has been the best ever joint program ever accomplished. So we made that argument with OSD, and Miss Lord, the undersecretary, basically delegated the program back to the Army. Doesn't mean that we're walking away from the Marine Corps or SOCOM. I think what we proved to OSD is that we've never been closer to SOCOM and the Marine Corps, and you could trust the Army to do this in a Black Hawk-like model to make something that is good for everybody. With all that said, here are these 2 aircraft, and we get criticized saying, you know, you couldn't even do 1 back in the day with Comanche. How are you going to do 2? And here is what I would tell you. We are far more at the inflection point of 1970 than we are at 1990. And in 1970, we delivered as an Army the Black Hawk and the Apache. And in 1990, we certainly failed with the Comanche. The budgets were different. The inflection point was not the same in 1990 as it was in 1970. And in my mind, the inflection point looks a lot more like 70 than 90. With that said, our current fleets are in good shape. And here's my promise to you. And here's what we've told every senior leader. We are not impacting Guard modernization to fund FVL. I'll say that again. We are not impacting Guard aviation modernization to fund FVL. So the Black Hawks are going to be bought out. That requirement is going to be bought out, and our plan is built on that. The Victor model is going to be coming to all of us, all 3 compos. And we're committed to, again, the Victor model. But at the end of the day, we're saying in FVL and really the greater aviation enterprise is we can't afford not to modernize. You know, the Black Hawk, it turned 40 years old a year ago, and it still goes together with hundreds of shims because we designed it in the 60s and we built it in the 70s. It's a great aircraft, but it's 40 years old, and if we don't lay something in now, it's going to be 50 and 60 and 70 before we get its replacement. We can't afford not to because all the Mike models we bought in the mid to late 2000s, so right around the surge, those all come due for recap in the 30s. And so are we going to just put $1 billion a year and get the same capability, or should we take that money and reinvest it in leap ahead capability? One of the JMR competitors, so the joint multi-role, those 2 aircraft we got flying, the 2 tech demonstrators, it went together with only 3 shims. You know, we're in a digital age now where our Apache and our Black Hawk were designed in an industrial age. We got to get into the digital age. And this gets into not only sustainment factors, but it gets into being able to fight and win on a future battlefield. With the FLRAA, I was talking again to some of the NGAUS leadership, and you know, the last two aircraft, or rotorcraft, to be designed and fielded, one took 17 years, and one took 14 years. These things take a long time to lay in, and we have to have the strategic patience for really the generation after us to be able to enjoy a very capable weapon system. The timeline we're on for FARA and FLRAA is about 9 years and 4 months. It's the same time that we took as an Army to make an Alpha model Apache into a Delta model Apache. And so how are we going to do that? Well, it's certainly going to take a team. And again, I've got a great cross-functional team from the PEOs, the PMs, multi-compo, Army Contracted Command, and aligned from S&T, RDT&E, all the way to procurement dollars. All that is lined up and ready to go so we can make a very aggressive timeline. But it's not lost on me that you know, we're not going to be able to ram this through on our own. It's going to take all of us. With that said, the two other lines of effort we have, we're looking hard at our unmanned aircraft systems. You haven't seen a lot on that because I don't want to spend billions of dollars developing something that somebody already has developed, or to get something that some other service or maybe a civilian sector has already developed. And so we're doing a lot of buy, try, decide, and we're just going almost off the shelf and getting what works and putting it in. With that, there's going to be problems on the sustainment side. We know that, but we'd rather forego the development dollars and maybe pay on the sustainment side, because most of this stuff is going to be not necessarily attritable, but we're going to move quick with it. And then the last thing, and probably the hardest thing we're going to do, is our open system architecture. So we want our aircraft and our weapon systems to be more like Android, so anybody can write an app for it. We feel like we can prevent vendor lock, drive the cost down, but also upgrade at the speed of technology. And I'm sure you guys have been the victims of aircraft survivability upgrades in your aircraft, and here, you know, you're waiting years and years and years for the B kits to be put on. We're tired of that. So we want to turn inside the enemy, not the other way around. So what have we, we're on contract with all those aircraft. We're moving out. You'll see FARA competitive prototypes in 23 fly, and you'll see FLRAA in the mid 25s. We have a plan, but it's not for public dissemination. I know there could be some industry folks in here, but we're committed to a multi-year acceleration in the Army for FLRAA, all with first unit equipped, looking at 2030. We were out to Western Test Ranges just last week. We fired an Israeli missile, Spike Enlos, and we fought it and fired it at multi-domain operation relevant distances. So we had the Apache mast. We fired 28 clicks to 32 clicks. We kept the missile on target against our pacing threat, which we think is their mobile SHORAD or Panzer, and we went 9 for 9. So we fired 5 of these missiles in Israel, and we fired 4 at Yuma last week, and what we're seeing is we can go hunt and kill our pacing threat, which is a counter-argument. Unfortunately, we need to make more in the Army than we do anywhere else. But we're looking at that standoff and overmatch. And then we did some work with our unmanned systems and AI. We used Maven and Minotaur algorithms to look at our initial look into algorithmic warfare. And what we did was we had a Gray Eagle in a RISTA, so reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition role. As it was scanning the battlefield, the AI algorithms picked up some targets. When they picked up the targets, they alerted the AMC, who was in the back of a Chinook. The AMC took control of the Gray Eagle with an iPad, and that's our scalable control interface. Looked at the target, cleared the fires, and hit fire on a drop glide bomb that came off of the Gray Eagle. In mid-flight, as the drop glide bomb was going towards the first target, the TOC, through, again, an AI algorithm, saw a higher priority target, and in mid-mission with the munition headed for the first target, retasked it to a second target, and we went 2 for 2 with those shots at China Lake. So that's our initial phase 0. And then the last thing I'll tell you is we've done about 9 months of high-fidelity modeling, physics-based modeling. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff that goes on with war games, and it's more of the art of how we fight versus just a very objective look. In my mind, the high-fidelity modeling isn't everything, but it gives us more of an objective look. What I want to tell you is RF propagation in a physics-based model is not linear. So when you're in a warfighter or something, they draw a red circle on the ground. They say, you know, if you aviators fly into this red circle, you're dead. That's not true. RF energy propagates very non-linearly, especially close to the ground, because there is clutter. And what we need to find as an aviation community is how to exploit that clutter, get as close as we can to the enemy, and start doing what we do, which is finding, fixing, and finishing them. And with that, sorry I didn't have slides. If you do want our kind of FEL 101, please reach out. We'll be happy to get them. But I thought I was making a speech today and not this more, you know, this is a much better forum, so I apologize. With that, I'll take some questions and hopefully dispel things that are maybe misconceptions out there, or maybe
okay, who's got questions?
Confirm them. While we wait, I'll filibuster for a second. So some of the things that your leadership talked to me about is the Apache seats at Fort Rucker. What I will tell you is we pulled a lot of the Apaches from the institutional, really, test community is where a lot of them came from. There's about 15 extra Apaches that are being scooped up now and sent to Fort Rucker to, again, generate more slots. And so I think next year you're going to see, you know, more opportunity to get your folks trained and get seats, you know, to everybody that needs them. So that's one. Okay, we got a question. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, sir. Paul Chernauskas from Texas.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. So, sir, regarding the 2 Flora prototypes that we have going from each of the different OEMs, they're both using different types of technology, and was just curious if you could comment about how exactly the variances of the technologies are viewed in terms of competitiveness and or acceptability.
Well, so it's probably too early to tell. We want them to ring out their tech demonstrators more, so I'll put a fine point on it. The 2 aircraft flying are tech demonstrators, so they're not prototypes. And so you have to talk to Kukla, you know, acquisition guy, to figure out where that line is. But to me, a tech demonstrator is a lower bar than a prototype. Congress gave us $20 more million this year for the JMR program, and so we're taking that $20 million, and what we've told all 4 competitors, because there's 2 that have done some other work for us, AVX and Karam, is transition your tech demonstration, which was just kind of the rotorcraft, advanced rotorcraft configuration, and talk to us more about making it a weapon system. As we see the fruits of that, we're also, you'll see another RFP come out within days to basically ask industry, because we've had an RFI come out, we've had an industry day in July that was attended by about 200 folks. Now we want to take about 2 years and just boil as much risk out of those 2 and multiple other configurations. I mean, there's probably 6 out there that could do it. We want to understand it more. So we don't want to be driven to too early of a decision. And I think you'll look for, in the early 20s, a down select where we finally understand it best and we're able to make an informed choice. Does that answer your question?
It does, sir. Thank you.
I think I'll just add to it, too, is we fought Scenario 7, which is the Kaliningrad EUCOM scenario in the high-fidelity modeling. We're fighting the Indo-PACOM now. That modeling is informing our demonstrations, but it's also informing our requirements. And we really want to understand how we fight against a peer and near peer in these two different theaters and make sure we understand what our priorities are. So court's still in session. Go ahead.
Question.
Good morning, sir. Chief Bowman from Arizona.
Morning.
I was wondering, as the future vertical lift, are we taking into account the ergonomics of the seats for the flight crews?
Yep. So we are with USEROL routinely. Their S&T has been realigned for cognitive offloading and for the endurance of the pilot, the aviator, the crew. So when we look at our reach, for example, FARA, we want it to go 135 nautical miles, hang around for 2 hours in a scout mission, and then come back. If you add up that flight time, it's more than we fly today. So we certainly need to have an ergonomically effective cockpit for the weapon system of the future. Because I think, again, our sons and daughters are going to be in there longer than we were.
Sir, I think you got one on your right.
Sir, Major Clements, Tennessee. We are just now getting radios in the Blackhawks that allow us to talk to public safety and, more importantly, to ride on their repeater systems so that a flight that's in Far East Tennessee can talk to a flight facility on the extreme western edge of the state.
Sure.
Will the next generation aircraft continue to use these land mobile radios?
I don't think so. I think that's a kind of a Title 32 thing. I think that's where it's divided. That's how I understand the issue. I could be convinced if there is a Title 10 requirement for that. I could be convinced. I just haven't seen it. My problem is the same as yours, though, right? When they made the soldier radio waveform, they didn't consider the Doppler effect, and so now you got a squad leader down there carrying 2 radios. That squad leader, to call in a medevac or a call for fire, has to carry the soldier radio waveform to talk to his brigade talk, and a SINGARS to talk to us. We can't let that happen. And so, absolutely, we need the multi-band capacity to be able to talk to our ground force, because that's what makes us great as Army Aviation. Now, when it comes to the civil band, I think what I am provisioning you for with our modular open system architecture is a much quicker and easier integration. But again, if you disagree, bring it up to my team. I mean, we still have time to look at that.
Thank you, sir. And quick follow-up, I'm told that the next generation of Blackhawk that we're receiving is going to drop high-frequency radio. Knowing that we're working in a satellite-defined or denied environment with Russia, China, and India all having the capability to destroy a satellite in orbit, and knowing that HF is the only radio form that can work without infrastructure, is HF going to be in the next generational lift?
That's a great way to phrase it. What we are doing at a higher classification level is looking at low probability of intercept and detect waveforms. And so that's where I'll leave it, but we absolutely feel we need to talk in a degraded and denied, highly competitive, highly complex environment, and so we're committed to bringing that. Are the data pipes going to be massive that you can run FMV through it in perpetuity, kill TV back to the TOC? No, but we'll be able to communicate the minimum viable product you need to fight and win, in one of these very, again, degraded, denied environments. And I'm very pleased with the progress of that particular program. The folks up at I2WD are doing that work. We're doing the S&T folks are running it with some RDT&E, so we're farther along than S&T on that.
Thank you, sir.
Any more? Sir, you think you got one more?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Sir, Major Gaskins from Ohio. You talked about mobile SHORAD. Air Defense is right now in a 1 to 3 deployment cycle, not including CTC rotations, but we're still training with outlaws and outdated material. We try to, at least with my battalion, we try to work with aviation with our brethren, but they're a little bit nervous, understandably.
Sure.
But is there any talk or like anything about getting us more updated near-peer threats or something to actually train with besides just outlaws?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion on that, and the counter UAS discussion and, you know, the mobile SHORAD discussion. I'm certainly not the expert on it. I know, and I met the colonel last night. You have a colonel from the Guard on the Air and Missile Defense cross-functional team. We probably should have had them here today because, again, you guys have been the, you know, you've been the place where we've kept that alive, right? I mean, the Compo 2, if we didn't have Compo 2 when it came to ADA, we'd be hurting right now on mobile SHORAD. So I would just be talking out of turn, but I do believe there's an individual here at the conference that can answer your question. But again, we're talking about hunting the Panzer, right? And we want to understand how they're fighting. I will say at NTC, they're re-equipping that so the aviation can fight against more of an integrated threat. And certainly in our China Lake, we did some classified work against the pacing threats that we see out there. And they're still running through the data. I know I didn't answer your question, but that's, we need to get the AMD guys here to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Okay. General Rugen, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your efforts and what you are doing for our future. And we appreciate you having guardsmen integrated into your team.
Absolutely. Call us if you need anything.
Well, sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir.